Hello, and welcome to MDIC's annual public forum. During today's session, Nadim, Yared, President and CEO of CVRx and MDIC Board Chair, will be joined by Dr. Jeff Shuren, Director of FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health, as well as other members of his team as they discuss CDRH's priorities, programs, and partnership with MDIC. Please make sure to join in the conversation on Twitter by following @MDIC Annual Forum and using the hashtag MDICAPF2020. Now, please welcome MDIC Board Chair Nadim Yared.
Welcome everyone to the FDA MDIC Town Hall Meeting 2020. This session has always been the major keynote session at our annual MDIC forum. And despite the current limitations due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a virtual town hall with FDA is always a standing room only event. So we do hope that this format actually allows for a broader audience to listen in and take away important strategic information from the remarkable FDA panel that we have assembled today. I'm Nadim Yared. I'm the President and CEO of CVRx, the company that has developed the breakthrough called Barostim Neo. It is, though, in my role as Chairman of MDIC that I have the pleasure to introduce and moderate the panel today. Actually, a decade ago, during a similar town hall meeting in Minneapolis, Dr. Jeff Shuren, the Center Director of FDA CDRH, at the time, Jeff, with few industry leaders, articulated the vision of a private-public partnership between the industry, patient advocacy groups, physician associations, and the government. The idea is to tackle pre-market common challenges, particularly at the time revolving around the regulatory science. And during these past 8-9 years, MDIC has grown to become the place where all of these stakeholders share their resources and their skills to address those major regulatory and market access challenges. Today, I will actually ask the panelists to add a twist in here and particularly address the center's efforts related to the COVID-19 pandemic, wherever it's applicable in what they're doing. But, without further ado here, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeff Shuren, the Center Director of CDRH. Jeff?
Thank you, Nadim. On behalf of Michelle, Andy, Daniel, Jessica, Cisco, Sarah, Annie, and myself, I'd like to welcome everyone to CDRH's Town Hall. I'm going to kick it off and begin with an update on CDRH activities. I'm going to focus most of my time on CDRH's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Patients and public health have been and continue to be our priority, and MDIC has been a vital partner in helping us achieve our historic mission to protect and promote public health and to achieve our vision of being both first in the world in identifying and addressing safety issues and assuring that patients have timely access to high-quality, safe, and effective medical devices. That's why, since the beginning of MDIC, we've had over 110 CDRH staff involved in the work of MDIC. And that's including in all of its work streams, with many exciting developments already achieved and underway. For example, the Science of Patient Input will have two important reports coming out this summer. One on maximizing patient input in the design and development of medical device clinical trials, and a second on best practice resources for communicating benefit, risk, and uncertainty for medical devices. Early feasibility study program has already starting to pay off dividends, and now we're looking to take those successes and expand the early feasibility study network to include the neurospace. Clinical Diagnostics has already put out a draft framework for in vitro diagnostic real-world evidence for public comment. The SHIELD effort is now posted up on the MDIC website. NEST has already completed 2 test cases with more on the way, and we're moving forward to, in the near future, have a soft launch of NEST 1.0. And both NEST and our work on real-world evidence in clinical diagnostics is now going to play an important role in an effort being coordinated by the Reagan-Udall Foundation to establish a diagnostics evidence accelerator, help us leverage real-world evidence to better understand the real-world performance of diagnostics and other tests being used to address the COVID-19 pandemic and to answer some critically important questions related to it. And our hope is that not only will we answer important questions for the COVID-19 pandemic, but to establish an infrastructure that will allow us to leverage that evidence in the use of diagnostic and other tests in the future, and also support the creation of evidence to then move tests that are under an emergency use authorization to a full approval by the FDA. Case for Quality continues to make important advancements, and now looking at the steps to take to turn it over into a true collaborative community and to incorporate a platform being developed called Medias to allow for the sharing of safety and quality information pertaining to medical devices in a safe space. All of these vitally important efforts. Today, CDRH has been actively engaged in the response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. It is our top priority. It is an all-hands-on-deck activity. And as you can see here on the slide, since the start of the pandemic to the end of May, we've already issued 22 guidance documents. We've been actively engaged in authorizing new products for the U.S. marketplace. To date, over 250 products authorized under our EUA authorities, many of those diagnostic tests. We've been actively engaged in addressing shortages of medical devices. That includes reaching out to over 1,000 medical device manufacturing sites to understand if there are problems in the supply chain, and this covers 12 countries. We've been engaged in horizon scanning. We have a dedicated team focused on medical device supplies round the clock. We've worked hard to identify alternative sources of products, such as new extraction reagents and new types of swabs that can be used to facilitate testing in the U.S. Work with manufacturers on ventilators to be able to use non-traditional components to reduce strain on the supply chain, as well as with working with manufacturers to increase production. Congress recently gave us new authority to require that makers of critical need devices report to the FDA when they become aware of the potential for significant disruption in their supply chain, to finally give us the opportunity to get information in advance to try to identify where we may see supply chain shortages in the future, rather than having to continually to reach out to manufacturing facilities to obtain information. We already put out guidance on this, and we'll be putting out more information in the near future. It is our hope to work with Congress to further expand these authorities so that we have not only a good surveillance system in the U.S., but ultimately a preventative system so that we don't experience the shortages that we've experienced during this pandemic again. Part of our efforts are working with a variety of other partners in the effort to scale up the production of products. That includes working with the VA and NIH and 3D manufacturers to use 3D printing as a mechanism for producing a variety of kinds of medical devices, and working with non-traditional manufacturers such as industry in the apparel sector and others. CDRH's own employees, our public health officers, have been in the front line in the fight against COVID-19, working in healthcare facilities and elsewhere to treat patients and do what we can to support the effort. What has been so touching is to hear the personal stories from our staff who have been out there on the front lines, what it means to take care of patients, and the importance of the work of the FDA in addressing the pandemic. At the same time, our day-to-day work continues. As you'll see on the slide, through the end of May, we continue to review traditional medical device submissions, and those numbers don't wane. In fact, what's encouraging is that the submissions for some of the more novel types of devices continues to remain healthy. But at the same time, too, the amount of work in reviewing novel technologies in support of COVID-19 is truly tremendous. At the end of May, between pre-EUAs and EUAs, we already had roughly 1,500 under review, and as I mentioned, we had already authorized about 250 products. So it goes to show you that the volume of work at the center has dramatically increased. But I'm just so proud to see our staff rise to the challenge. To help support our interactions with our stakeholders, we also created hotlines and a variety of email boxes addressed to dealing with particular issues in an attempt to provide our stakeholders with feedback and answer their questions in a timely manner. In fact, since March, we've received over 200,000 calls and emails, and we've responded to 95% of them. As we move forward to address this pandemic, in the end, we will ultimately be successful. But we will only be successful if we are working together through true partnerships like MDIC. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Jeff. What FDA has been able to accomplish during this crisis is nothing short of inspiring. We owe a lot of gratitude to the women and men at CDRH who went beyond duty to try and keep us all safe. Jeff, quick follow-up question. We all know that the healthcare ecosystem and the medical device landscape are constantly evolving in the current COVID-19 public health emergency. What lessons can MDIC, the device industry, and other stakeholders use moving forward?
Well, there have been several lessons learned in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I expect there'll be several more before it's over. Let me highlight two of them. The first has been the value of active engagement between FDA developers and other members of the public. I think in response to that timely, continuous engagement between us and developers, we've been able to facilitate rapid access to important technologies to respond to the pandemic. And I think one of the questions before us is whether or not we want this world of very near-time engagement and back and forth to be the exception, to be what we expect during an emergency, or is this how we want business as usual to be conducted even when there's not a national emergency? I think the second that's been highlighted is the weaknesses we have in the U.S. supply chain and what steps are necessary for us to bolster it, make it more resilient, so we never have to go through the kinds of shortages we've experienced during this pandemic. One of the steps that FDA has been taking is to make greater investments in advanced manufacturing, having the more modern technologies that allows manufacturing to be more automated, more intelligent, more efficient, and in that respect, to make manufacturing a more resilient process. And I think MDIC could play a critical role in that activity and something for us to consider whether or not this is a work stream we engage in and maybe as an expansion of our Case for Quality initiative.
Thank you, Jeff. It's always inspiring listening to your vision. Our next topic is one of my favorites, the voice of the patient. And who's better than the charismatic leader, Dr. Michelle Tarver, who's the Director for Patient Science Engagement at CDRH, to tell us about the center's effort to continue developing the science of patient input through the framework established by MDIC.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to share the work that we've been doing with MDIC in expanding the patient's voice across the total product lifecycle. As you know, the CDRH Patient Science and Engagement Program is truly inspired by patients and driven by science. Our primary goal is to not just hear the patient's perspective, but to understand it and incorporate it into all of our regulatory activities where it's appropriate. Critical to this goal, being successful, is creating a culture of patient engagement. This is a relationship with patients that can inform how we review and evaluate information that's submitted to a file regarding the patient's input. It also helps to inform how we can optimize the research roadmap in a way that we generate valid scientific evidence that can impact our benefit-risk decision-making. I talked about patient engagement being about a relationship, and it really is an opportunity for mutually sharing information and forming effective collaborations across the total product lifecycle. Our work with MDIC has truly embodied the sentiment, where we have patients as advisors as part of the steering group, as part of the study groups, that sit side by industry, researchers, and others to generate solutions and study design features that really can measure things that are important to patients. We also have been working with MDIC to create a white paper that talks about how patients' input can be maximized in the design and conduct of clinical trials. In addition to this work, MDIC is planning a patient engagement forum, which is another opportunity for all of us in the stakeholder community to sit with one another and think about how we can generate input from patients and then effectively communicate the studies from the medical device evaluations back to patients. Please stay tuned for the details of that patient engagement forum. But this isn't a relationship. This is not the science. The science of patient engagement is really a structured, well-defined collection of information from patients in a way that's reliable and can inform our benefit-risk decision-making. That tool that creates this structured collection can be a measure of how a patient feels and functions, such as a patient-reported outcome measure, or it can be a measure of the value that patients place on the benefits and risks associated with the devices used to treat their conditions. And this is patient preference information. As you probably have heard, MDIC has been working with FDA to do a heart failure study in patient preference, and this study is being conducted in the pre-competitive space to help inform our benefit-risk decision-making and ultimately with the goal to inform clinical trial design. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the efforts that CDRH has taken to involve the patient input in our efforts. The Patient Engagement Advisory Committee is the only committee like it at the agency. It is comprised solely of patients, caregivers, and patient advocates, and provide formal recommendations to FDA on general matters related to medical devices. Over the years, we've had a number of these meetings that have led to deliverables, including a draft guidance in patient engagement. We've also engaged with patients as part of our COVID response. We've sent surveys out to patient groups to get input about difficulties they may be having obtaining their medical devices and other challenges they face with care of their underlying medical conditions. We've talked about the MDIC efforts in patient preference information, and truly their patient-centered benefit risk framework laid the foundation and catapulted the industry to doing patient preference studies. In fact, we have 20 industry-sponsored submissions that are focused on patient preference information that are either completed or in the pipeline. And some of these submissions have specifically impacted kidney disease, expanded labeling, as well as inform the design of a clinical investigation. We also have seen that over 60% of our submissions that are PMAs, HDEs, or de novo have contained patient-reported outcome measures. So clearly, industry sees benefit in including this information in their evaluation of medical devices as well. So we've talked about some traditional measures, but there are new ways of collecting information from patients on the horizon, and one of them is patient-generated health data. When we talk about patient-generated health data, we're really talking about wearables and sensor data that can be collected by devices that patients wear every day. We're also talking about patient-driven registries and social media platforms. We are looking at novel ways that this information can be incorporated as patient science, as valid scientific evidence in our evaluation of medical devices, whether it be looking at the interplay between patient preference information and patient-reported outcome measures, or how patient preference information attributes can inform shared decision-making tools. We also are looking at how we can look at patient-driven registries as complementary sources of information, since these registries often collect information that's different from the information that's collected in clinical trials. And we're also looking at ways that we can do novel signal detection through the use of social media. So we have a number of resources available on the CDRH website, and we encourage you to reach out and contact us if you have any questions about ways in which you can use patient-reported outcome measures, patient preference information, or any other form of patient engagement in your medical device evaluation programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I should have mentioned that my company, CVRx, is one of the stakeholders in the Science of Patient Input and Heart Failure project that you just mentioned. We are very excited about how this project is progressing. So thank you for your leadership in this field of patient engagement. Michelle, more and more device companies have started incorporating patient preferences and patient-reported outcomes in their development plans. But what would you say to those who are still unsure about the value of doing so?
Well, value is a word that we're increasingly seeing used throughout the entire healthcare ecosystem. There's value-based care paradigms where payers and providers and patients are really paying attention to what are they getting from a particular medical intervention. I think the value that's added is by keeping in mind those audiences, that patients and providers are looking for something that measures what's important to them. And if you include it in the development pathways for your medical device, it's more likely to be effectively communicated to patients in a way that can inform the decision-making. In addition, in the times of COVID, as you know, that a lot of healthcare has moved from the in-person setting to the remote setting. And the availability of patient-reported outcomes that really can give a reflection of how a patient is doing are critically needed. More and more providers are looking for ways that they can remotely capture data. So there's a greater focus on looking at measures that come from the patient directly. And I think it's an opportunity for the medical device community to develop those tools that can be greater integrated into the care paradigms. And I think the last thing that's really of importance is that we've seen examples of where it's worked. We've seen in the expanded labeled indications for a kidney device. We've also seen it be very effective in informing the design of a clinical trial for ear tubes. We increasingly are seeing more and more creative applications, and so we encourage people to come chat with us early on as they're thinking of potential applications for a patient preference study or for a PRO measure. And we look forward to those exchanges because we do know that by us working together to measure that input, we really do provide a service to the public and we inform patient decision-making.
Wow, thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Our next speaker now is Dr. Andrew Farb, Chief Medical Officer, Health Technology 2 at the Office of Product Evaluation and Quality at CDRH. Dr. Farb was given the insurmountable challenge to accelerate first-in-man clinical trials in the United States, particularly at their onset. And in fact, we need to do this to accelerate access to novel, innovative, life-saving technologies to the US patients who need those. So, Dr. Farb, Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the U.S. Early Feasibility Study Program at this year's MDIC Annual Public Forum, Virtual CDRH Town Hall. I'm Andrew Farb, co-leader of the EFS Program, and I've been with the program since its inception in 2014. I thought it would be a good idea to review the objectives of the EFS Program, which was intended to reverse the trend of initial clinical testing of novel devices being performed overseas. At its core, the program is all about the patients and increasing their access to potentially beneficial medical devices and do it in a way that protects study participants under FDA's ID regulations. We also sought to enhance collaboration among the members of the device development ecosystem, that is, device innovators, the industry, investigators, and regulators. So what has this work yielded? We've been able to approve over 200 EFS IDEs to treat more than 2,500 patients since the EFS guidance was issued. There has been a steady increase in the number of EFS IDE submissions and approvals in the last 2 years, with more than doubling of where we were in 2013 to 2014. Currently, over 3/4 of EFS IDEs are approved within 2 FDA review cycles. And early feasibility studies are in wide distribution across CDRH, with the highest numbers in the cardiovascular and neurological device areas. Within FDA, efforts to maintain EFS program growth include advancing EFS principles to cross-cutting non-clinical test requirements for more efficient IDE review, facilitating EFS transition to pivotal trials, expanding the EFS program across CDRH by identifying areas in which EFS are customarily conducted overseas, directly reaching out to sponsors and developers of innovative devices, enlisting the active participation of clinical research leaders, promoting EFS at professional society meetings, and interactions with patient advocacy groups and device trade organizations. We quickly recognized that regulatory efforts alone would not be enough to revitalize early-stage device studies in the United States. Great programs require great partners, and our partnership with MDIC has been critical to the success of the EFS program. Here's a sampling of MDIC's activities that have helped promote and advance early feasibility studies in the U.S. These include multiple resources for EFS sponsors, sites, and patients, such as tools and workshops for a reusable master clinical trial agreement, informed consent, and IRB interactions. EFS Site Consortium was created, initially focused on cardiovascular devices, and you can recognize the names of many leading U.S. research institutions that have joined this consortium. These sites have agreed to participate in an ongoing project to overcome EFS startup delays that can include IRB approval, contracting and budgeting, and getting the first EFS subject enrolled. We have been test driving the MDIC tools to achieve the 60-60-60 day goal. That is, IDE approval by FDA within 60 days, IRB and contracting approval performed in parallel within the next 60 days, and first patient enrolled in the EFS in the next 60 days. That's the meaning of 60-60-60. So how is the EFS ecosystem doing? Here are the results for the last 2 fiscal years compared to the 2 prior years. Process improvements have reduced the average IDE and IRB approval times to below the 60-day goal. But we still have considerable work to do to address contracting delays. The time to first patient enrolled has substantially improved from 187 to 88 days, but we are not quite meeting the 60-day goal. Overall, there has been substantial progress. We've seen about a 2-month reduction in the cumulative time from IDE approval to first patient enrolled. To address particularly knotty contracting challenges, MDIC convened a well-attended workshop earlier this year where leading sponsors and experienced EFS sites shared budgeting best practices. The group came up with additional ways to overcome delays, including uniform startup protocol documents, a tool for budget negotiations, and a site-based standardized list of invoice items. So here's where we'd like to be over the next year, and it goes without saying that we hope to see improvements in the pandemic and other social and economic problems that are affecting our nation and making life so difficult for so many of our citizens. We'd like to see increased EFS utilization across all CDRH device areas, more early feasibility studies transitioning to pivotal trials, continued interaction with CMS colleagues on EFS coverage decisions, greater EFS program synergies with CDRH's Breakthrough Devices program, EFS promotion through MDIC Resources and MDIC's EFS Express newsletter, and continued collaboration among stakeholders for sustainable EFS growth this year and beyond. It's been great speaking with you today about CDRH's Early Feasibility Study program, and we look forward to interacting with you on your EFS projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Your objectives for next year are sweet music to my ears, and I'm sure to the ears of all innovators in the United States and to many patients who are waiting for therapies to improve their lives. So to all of the clinical trialists here in the audience, you heard Andrew, bring forward your early feasibility trials and discuss them with MDIC FDA team. Quick follow-up question, Andrew. What additional resources or tools do you think would be beneficial for companies looking to navigate the EFS ecosystem?
Thanks for the question. For companies that are unfamiliar with the EFS program and who need basic information on EFS regulatory principles, a good place to start would be a teleconference with myself and EFS program co-leader Dr. Maureen Dreher. We go over EFS concepts and discuss ways to effectively interact with FDA review teams in pre-submission meetings. We also find that early informational meetings are very helpful to introduce novel technologies to FDA staff and discuss the target medical condition, device evaluation strategy, and the rationale for conducting an early feasibility study. These informational meetings can often be scheduled fairly quickly. There is also the EFS mailbox and CDRH Learn EFS educational materials on the CDRH website available to the public. Outside of FDA, the EFS pages on the MDIC website have many useful tools on patient outreach, informed consent, and contracting and budgeting. Sponsors can also reach out directly to Dr. Liliana Ricon-Gonzalez, who is MDIC's program director. The good news is that there is plenty of EFS program support both within FDA and beyond FDA through MDIC to help make the program a success for the industry, investigators, FDA, and patients.
Thank you, Andrew, for your leadership. Very, very impactful. Next topic is about real-world evidence, RWE, and a very, very important effort we call NEST. This is a very important topic, so please listen carefully to our next panelist, Dr. Dan Caños. Dan, please introduce yourself and walk the audience today through this important field of real-world evidence.
I am Daniel Caños, the Director of the Office of Clinical Evidence and Analysis within the Office of Product Evaluation and Quality at CDRH. I'll be reviewing clinical evidence generation within the National Evaluation System for Health Technology and FDA's role in this multi-stakeholder community. Potential usages of real-world evidence, RWE, for total product lifecycle device evaluation include hypothesis generation, informing future prospective trial design, serving as a control arm for clinical trials. RWD, or real-world data sources, can act as a platform to support a clinical trial for data collection or upon which a randomization could occur. They can also be a data collection framework for post-market evidence generation, such as post-approval studies, or be leveraged for active surveillance. Additionally, market-authorized devices, it can generate evidence to support indication expansions and inform future innovation. Potential benefits of RWD sources include providing a better understanding of device performance in the real-world environment, which can further inform the benefit-risk profile. Facilitation of the collection of outcomes, not always feasible in traditional clinical trials, such as performance in diverse patient populations and subgroups, long-term outcomes, the ability to assess rare outcomes as a result of tapping into larger data sets. Also provides opportunities to partner with patients in new ways, understanding patient-reported outcomes, medical apps, wearable device, and user experience. It can also reduce time and cost to answer important questions. In September of last year, FDA announced our participation in the NEST Coordinating Center, NEST-CC collaborative community, to work together with the multi-stakeholder community to develop methodologies and system designed to drive down the time and cost of RWD collection and analysis and increase the value and the use of RWE to meet the needs of patients, payers, the medical device industry, healthcare professionals, and regulatory bodies. The NEST-CC test cases explore the network collaborators' ability to capture the data needed to support a range of studies and analyses across the medical device total product lifecycle. FDA is connecting with test case principal investigators to provide feedback on applicability of NEST test cases for regulatory decision-making. To maximize the project relevance for regulatory decision-making, these discussions will be picking up considerably now that all the test cases have kicked off. Lessons learned from the test cases will inform the NEST future state in ways that will identify new efficiencies in the system and drive more efficient conduct of studies moving forward. Through leveraging administrative claims, EHRs, national and international registries, active medical device surveillance will better protect patients by continuously generating, accessing, and evaluating large data sets on device performance and clinical outcomes associated with device use in routine clinical practice. The multi-stakeholder access surveillance task force representing network collaborators, providers, payers, industry, patient groups, and FDA will work together to develop the data infrastructure and methods, the analytics, which are key to active surveillance efforts. NEST-CC will be utilizing a cloud infrastructure to facilitate collection across multiple network collaborators, data analysis of de-identified data, undergoing quality checks, running analytics, and delivering results and compiling metadata via dashboards. So the roadmap for the real-world evidence, this pathway, started off in 2017 with the FDA's release of the use of RWE to support regulatory decision-making for a medical device, and that guidance which clarifies how we evaluate real-world data to determine whether they are sufficient for generating the types of RWE that can be used for FDA regulatory decision-making. In addition to this, NEST-CC published the methods framework defining the key components of study protocols for the evaluation of medical devices, and the data quality framework covering data governance characteristics, data capture, transformation, and curation. The FDA guidance and NEST-CC frameworks represent a good starting point for the community for the use of RWE in decision-making, which are works in progress. The future work revision can provide more clarity around how to assess or characterize the potential fit for regulatory purpose of different data sources to address specific questions, providing greater fidelity around the use cases of this data. Further, a roadmap covering how active surveillance capabilities will be established and tools to be leveraged is currently under development and will be issued for public comment. Moving forward, the NEST Coordinating Center collaborative community will further enhance the care of patients within a NEST model, a multi-stakeholder community. It will be a platform capable of embedding clinical trials where RWD can generate RWE to support regulatory and payer decisions, refine medical practice, and patient caregiver care. Finally, active surveillance will improve access and analysis of data to ensure timely identification of safety signals. FDA is here to help and facilitate engagement around RWE through our participation in the NEST-CC collaborative community, connecting with test case principal investigators to maximize the project relevance for regulatory decision-making.
Dan, thank you. May I ask you a question on NEST 1.0? So as it launches, what are the key takeaways from the test cases so far, and what challenges still need to be worked through?
As NEST 1.0 launches, some key takeaways from the test cases are that early engagement with FDA on real-world evidence studies is important. One can obtain feedback, gain insights about what will be needed to be included within future regulatory submissions, and important points of consideration for these analyses can be discussed. Moving forward, it'll be important for NEST 1.0 customers to have access to the data quality assessment of the NEST data sources, and for best practices to be established for how that can be presented to the FDA, payers, and other stakeholders. That includes data, how it was collected, how it was standardized, what data checks were performed. Provenance of the clinical evidence will be key. Data mapping within NEST version 1.0 will be very important to ensure understanding of the provenance of this data.
All right, thanks, Dan. This has been so far a very informative session and the bar placed very, very high. Let's see how our next panelists do. Jessica Wilkerson. is the Cyber Policy Advisor at CDRH. Cyber Policy Advisor. She has the immense challenge on her hands to ensure that our product development framework yield medical devices that are cyber secure. So, Jessica, cybersecurity is a very broad topic. What aspect will you address today on this panel?
So I'm here today to talk about FDA's partnership with MDIC on threat modeling and why it's so critical to today's efforts on medical device and healthcare cybersecurity. And to do that, I have to start out by saying something that's going to sound incredibly trite, but that I do mean from the bottom of my heart. And that's this. Cybersecurity is really hard. The last couple of years, and certainly the last couple of decades, have certainly shown that with the incidents that we've seen across not only healthcare, but across all sectors. It's something that we as a society that is becoming increasingly interconnected with digital systems have learned. And as we become more reliant on these systems, the things that we have to do in order to be cyber secure and to remain cyber secure increase. They become more complex. And that has to do with the fact that information systems themselves are incredibly complex. It doesn't matter whether or not organizations are using the same hardware or the same software. The people who are using those systems and the way in which they are using those systems are all unique. And that means that there is no one-size-fits-all to cybersecurity. There's no one right way to do it, and it's not a checklist exercise. And what that means is that organizations have to look at their own systems. They have to look at their own risks, and then they have to think about what the potential threats to those systems could be. And then they have to decide what to do about those threats. And that, in essence, is threat modeling. And that's why FDA's partnership with MDIC is so very critical, because that's exactly what MDIC is helping us do. Now, this effort has two main thrusts. The first is really around adoption and awareness, because like many things, threat modeling is something that has existed in the general information technology industry for a long time. But its evolution and its adaptation into healthcare cybersecurity and medical device cybersecurity is newer. And with the patient safety concerns and the other unique concerns with healthcare cybersecurity, we cannot use threat modeling in the same exact way that information technology practitioners have been able to. And MDIC has been instrumental in helping us figure out how to adapt threat modeling procedures into medical device and other healthcare cybersecurity concerns. So that adoption and awareness efforts that MDIC is helping us do it is impossible to overstate how valuable that has been. And even more so than that, the other thing that MDIC is helping us do is create the materials that those in industry and at FDA need in order to really institutionalize and operationalize threat modeling within healthcare and medical device cybersecurity best practices. They are helping design a playbook that is not just MDIC designed or FDA designed, that has industry input, that they are helping to put together the playbook that they will then use to ensure that they know how to do threat modeling in the best way possible, so that they can share that knowledge and their best practices and the hard lessons that they've learned with others in the industry to ensure that all of us are safer together. And they are taking this playbook, and it's going to be something that MDIC is going to help us socialize. It's going to be something that they help us improve. And we are incredibly excited for that playbook to become available for others to use. The other thing that MDIC is helping us do, and this one I really do want to underline because I think it's so valuable, they're helping us actually train individuals at these medical device companies on how to do threat modeling. They're bringing in world-class expertise to do these boot camps that are going to train these professionals in how to do exactly what I said at the beginning of this talk, to take their systems and take their risks and start modeling the threats to understand the best things that they can do to protect their systems and protect the people who rely on those systems, like patients and caregivers and hospitals and others. And they are doing this in this unique way. They are not only training those individuals to do it, they're training the trainers. They're going to train people to do threat modeling in medical device cybersecurity. And that is something that is so valuable because it creates the pipeline that we need in order to have a sustainable threat modeling effort. These individuals are going to be able to go back to their companies and train others within their companies to do exactly what they learned how to do, to threat model in a way that we need in order to meet today's and tomorrow's cybersecurity threats. And so with MDIC's efforts for these train the trainer boot camps, which have already taken place, they are now going to have additional boot camps to train just additional individuals. And so with this effort, what was at one point a relatively unknown concept in medical device cybersecurity, this idea of threat modeling, is going to spread, and it's going to take hold, and it's going to improve the ability for medical device companies and healthcare practitioners and the FDA to meet today's cybersecurity concerns within the healthcare and medical device sector. And FDA, we really cannot overstate how valuable and how much we are looking forward to that effort culminating, and how much we continue to look forward to working with MDIC to do exactly that.
Thank you, Jessica. So basically, in your opinion, how has the partnership with MDIC helped to increase awareness and knowledge of threat modeling and its importance within the medical device industry?
So the effort with MDIC has really been critical in doing exactly that and increasing that adoption and awareness, because just simply having these events and socializing these events is drawing attention to the fact that it is an important concept that in medical device and healthcare cybersecurity has not been talked about as much as it should. And so by having these events, by talking about it, by sharing with the industry the fact that they're working with the FDA and they're putting together these materials in the way that they are, that adoption and awareness is really driving the fact that threat modeling is something that they should be paying attention to. And by getting industry to start asking those questions, what is threat modeling? Is it something that I should be doing? Is it something that my company should be doing? It gets them interested in it. And frankly, that interest is then what drives them beginning to participate and them beginning to develop the skills to do threat modeling, and them, frankly, implementing it within their own systems, their own product spaces, their own processes. And that's why it's been so critical.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next panelist, Francisco Vicenti, is Program Manager for the Case for Quality Initiative. Cisco, so I will not steal your thunder here, but I am personally a huge fan of the Case for Quality program. And our company has participated in this program, I think, since its inception. So, Cisco, if you can hear me, please go ahead, introduce yourself and the program.
Thank you, everyone, for the time and for allowing me to come in and really share with you some of our experiences with MDIC and detail some of the work that we've been doing together in order to advance the MedTech quality and innovation, which is a lot of the efforts that are part of our Case for Quality initiative within CDRH. My name is Cisco Vicenti. I am the Program Manager for our Case for Quality initiative. And for people who are familiar with the program, and some of this may be repeat material, but for those who are not, just briefly, our Case for Quality initiative was launched by CDRH in 2011 originally, and it was really an effort to try to address risk to patients that we kept seeing recurring issues, and to help transition the industry and the whole medical device ecosystem from a state of just focusing on compliance to really just driving a culture that is really prioritizing product quality and patient outcomes. This is truly a collaborative effort that has been facilitated by the Medical Device Innovation Consortium. It brings together all stakeholders to really drive the solutions and identify what additional barriers or problems we are encountering as we progress through this change and this journey that we've been engaged on. 3 of the principal initiatives that we started with were focusing on quality, driving a different shift in terms of moving beyond that compliance baseline that was the traditional engagement between industry and FDA. There are several activities within that space that we are going to be discussing briefly today. One is our Voluntary Improvement Program, our Make Kappa Cool initiative, which really grew out of that program, the focus that these agencies got right now, and the center in particular on advanced manufacturing. And then the other pieces that we've got regarding our Accelerating Sustainable Capability Pilot, which is also something that we've learned and found a need for and continue to develop the programs collectively. One of the other initiatives that we've been driving through our Case for Quality efforts is really enhancing the collective ecosystem's data and analytics capability, coming in from what the industry is able to collect and do, what other information is out there from patients, payer providers that are indicative of product quality or can help drive and identify quickly where there is issues or other types of activities that we can engage in to address patient safety or product quality problems. And then the other piece of all of this, which really is the part that brings it all together, is how do we develop an adaptive regulatory framework? How do we really drive incentivizing and letting the marketplace and the collective community reward the focus on quality, and at the same time still meet our regulatory requirements and sustain the high bar of safety and effectiveness that I think we've all been accustomed to and really driving at. When we talk about MDIC's Case for Quality projects, there is a lot going on. We've got our Voluntary Improvement Program, which was the first leg of some of these efforts and initiatives, and it is a shift in terms of how we go about assessing an organization. Instead of looking for compliance, we are looking to really understand the quality maturity of the system, right? Where is it? Where is it doing well? Where does it need improvement? What level are they at? It provides a roadmap for really advancing beyond that quality baseline, driving integration back in. This program has been in a pilot mode for a couple of years now and has shown really dramatic results. So we are looking to really take and operationalize that as we move forward. We've got our Make Kappa Cool initiative, which drove another effort from that activity. Part of the things that we learned is the system that is really dependent, that we are all dependent on to really problem solve, find issues, has grown into a burdensome and a self-feeding beast, and we wanted to kind of reset that and re-engage that problem-solving mode to really address those patient product quality issues. Our initiatives on advanced manufacturing. This is all part of our drive forward and enabling industry to be more proactive, more data-driven, more engaged, and really leveraging the tools, technologies to make them competitive and make the product safer, higher quality moving forward. And last is our Accelerating Sustainable Capability Pilot, which we'll talk about in a second. The Accelerating a Sustainable Capability Pilot really leverages a lot of what we learned from the VIP program and the quality maturity model in order to help and work with manufacturers who are still struggling within their system, driving some of the integration and looking to drive some of those improvements to bring them into that mode of continuous improvement faster. What are we doing next, and what are some of our next steps? We talked about the enhancing performance analytics. We are engaging right now and collaborating with MITRE, who is a development. They're developing a trusted third party for us. They are working collectively with several of our stakeholders to build out what we're calling the Medical Device Innovation, Information and Analysis Sharing Platform, to bring all that data together in a protected space, bring that partnership and bring everybody out to the table with the right information to really tackle some of the bigger issues that are happening across the ecosystem. Why are we doing all of this? This is really part of FDA's shift to really driving a change into being a more collaborative, data-driven regulatory agency. All this information, this data, brings us a lot of visibility. It does really drive a least burdensome approach, and the improvements that we see in terms of being able to provide better access to safer product, accelerate the pace of innovation, is really what all of this does, and it comes together from that standpoint. We always talk about several of the initiatives that the center's got going on, and there is a lot going on at the center right now when you think about what we've got available to us in terms of our toolboxes. We've got our continuous improvement activities. We've got some of the data we're talking about right now. We've got our normal enforcement tools. We're looking at our global harmonization efforts, cybersecurity, what we're looking for from a patient standpoint, and our pre-cert programs. All of that is really about enhancing our FDA toolbox. But in order to do that, we've got to enable some of the changes. And the tools we've got at our disposal, we've got our TPLC restructuring. For those who aren't familiar with that, the center did go through a reorganization in order to really be integrated into a total product lifecycle model. Our UDI efforts that we're working on to really drive policy regulatory changes. Now we've got our case for quality efforts, our advanced manufacturing activities to really help drive the change. And then other things that we were thinking in terms of how our typical regulatory model gets applied, adapted, and really changed in order to really account for what the current state of best practices are. Why do we really think about doing this? We've got our NEST initiative, which is geared towards that real-world data and evidence that's available. We're trying to improve the analytics around that information so that we can actually make better, more collectively informed decisions. And the last piece of it really is the engagement with the patients, right? Bringing them back into the fold and really recentering around why we are doing all of this as an agency and what is our mission and what it is their preference and the role that they can contribute in terms of helping provide that assurance across the whole ecosystem. It really is about bringing everything back to that patient and touching on what they can do. And all this information is really about helping the agency be better informed with regards to their decision making, really balance out that consideration of benefit and risk when we move forward. And believe it or not, it sounds like a lot, but the goal really is, and this does enable us to be a lot more proactive in terms of our least burdensome stances in both industry and within the agency. So it does all really fold and come together, despite the fact that it looks like a lot of ongoing projects that sometimes people ask us about and wonder where we are moving. So a lot of our work here at CDRH is really geared towards driving a transformation that brings us back towards the patient and what it is that we are looking to deliver for them and what the outcome they expect from us is. These activities and efforts are all connected. They are really geared towards moving our transformation along with industry's transformation and really re-engaging the ecosystem. The work that's being done now and the work that several of the people at MDIC and in that public-private partnership are contributing is really essential to making sure that we move lock in step with what's happening within the medical device ecosystem. And hopefully, we will continue this effort and engagement with your participation and really bring in more of both our internal perspectives and the collaboration we've been getting up until now within the industry.
Thank you, Cisco. So during this pandemic, many discussions have focused on the need to increase our domestic manufacturing capabilities, right? So how do you see the case for quality efforts helping to facilitate advanced manufacturing in the United States of America?
That's actually a great question and really ties into some of the discussions we're having throughout the presentation with regards to how all of these things integrate. The advanced manufacturing efforts that we've got really do align exceedingly well with our Case for Quality initiative. Our Case for Quality is looking to really drive and provide the tools, the engagement to move the needle from a very compliance-heavy focus on both sides. This isn't just a FDA or an industry only issue, right? We really have been doing this collectively together for several decades. But as we progress, as the Case for Quality helps enable different practices, different approaches, new methodologies like our assessments and our maturity appraisals to really understand how all this is coming together within industry and how the system, the quality system, and the regulations are being integrated, our advanced manufacturing efforts become the next stage and the next step. It is the opportunity to demonstrate within a medical device company different controls, different mechanisms, all things that bring together a much more error-proof production, a much more rapid product development cycle. It is a lot more information that we gain. It is all the controls that the regulations and the quality system is really intended to deliver, really put together into a clean, very sustainable package. So it is the next phase in the evolution. We've got a tool now within our Case for Quality and our VIP program that helps drive the focus on the practices. When we talk about advanced manufacturing, what's happening, the behaviors, different ways to really look at the process and the methods. But then now we're starting to roll in the technology portions of it. And this effort, especially with work that we've been engaging on with MDIC, is really starting to bring its focus with some of the partnerships we've got within the U.S. manufacturing. Now, does that mean that we don't understand that medical device companies are global companies, that there is a lot of production that happens outside the U.S.? We do understand that, and nothing precludes some of these activities and practices to being applied everywhere. But the focus on trying to bring some of that back here, making the production more cost-effective, to make it faster, to really be able to increase production, is something that has been a background, really vision and part of what our Case for Quality efforts are entailing. So we see the advanced manufacturing efforts as an opportunity to really enable the production here in the U.S. to be a lot more resilient, to be a lot faster, to be a lot more engaged and data-driven as we move forward, which will make it more competitive and really deliver much better products down the road.
Thank you, Cisco. Switching topics now. Many people took diagnostics for granted, and it wasn't until the COVID-19 pandemic that the population at large started realizing how crucial diagnostic tests are. Basically, it took the worst pandemic of our lifetime for many of us to understand how important this field is. And it is in this context that I will now invite our next speaker, Dr. Sarah Brenner, an Associate Director for Medical Affairs at CDRH, to address this very important topic of clinical diagnostics.
Hello, and welcome to the MDIC Annual Public Forum. Thank you so much for joining us during this critical time in our nation's history and in the world. Today, I'm going to talk a bit about diagnostics during and beyond the pandemic. Our mission at FDA includes both promotion and protection of public health. In the unique circumstances that we're dealing with now, this takes a variety of different angles. With regards to in vitro diagnostics during this era, we are seeing a lot of emergency use authorization applications. So we're moving applications through very quickly that have to do with viral nucleic acid detection, direct antigen detection, and antibody detection. Balancing the risks of these different devices includes both the aspects of safety and innovation. We want products to come to market quickly as there is a crisis unfolding and people need access to safe and effective devices. It's also important to remember in the greater context that testing is part of a larger strategy. It's part of a hierarchy of controls and risk mitigations that happen at different levels. It's important while we're coming up with different types of diagnostic tools and strategies for how to best use them in different populations, that we continue to practice infection control practices, which includes things like social distancing, hand hygiene, and the other things that CDC has talked about. I'm going to speak a little bit about how diagnostics are used and how they might change over the course of this pandemic. There are many different activities and initiatives going on in the Office of In Vitro Diagnostics and CDRH. Some have to do with biomedical innovation and making sure that products are getting to market quickly. Others have to do with the back end of laboratory diagnostics, and that is data harmonization, so that we can roll up, aggregate, and analyze data at every level that it's needed to inform evidence-based public health decision-making. The health data infrastructure underlies that, and clinical diagnostics, of course, are what people hear about on top of what's going on behind the scenes. The other couple things that I'll touch on today have to do with the use of real-world evidence in a couple of different ways. One is a project ongoing with MDIC, another is a project ongoing with the Reagan-Udall Foundation. All of these different aspects and projects do roll together to try to accomplish the goals that I mentioned a moment ago, and that's both the protection and promotion of public health. I have a lot of information here on the slides, but what I'll briefly do is walk through a few different projects and highlight some of the things that I think are really important for folks to understand in terms of FDA's response to COVID-19. One of the projects that had been ongoing before the pandemic hit was called SHIELD, Semantic Harmonization and Interoperability Enhancement for Laboratory Data. This project, led by one of my colleagues, Mike Waters, has been ongoing in an attempt to harmonize the data that I mentioned that underlies diagnostic tools. What's very important about this in the case of COVID is that we need to ensure that diagnostics, the different types that I just mentioned, are able to be aggregated and analyzed for individuals, for populations, and for the United States as a whole. Understanding how to integrate this data and then analyze it helps us to improve diagnostic data quality, helps us identify shortages, and will help to improve the speed and accuracy of both diagnostic testing and reporting. If you're interested in learning more about COVID SHIELD, there's a website on CDC's Division of Laboratory Systems page that will give you the actual harmonization sheet and coding. You could also email us at the email listed on the slide and provide feedback and engage with us and help to promote this effort and move it forward. The next project that I'll briefly touch on is this Reagan-Udall Foundation Diagnostics Evidence Accelerator. This is an effort led by CDRH and the Office of the Commissioner to use real-world data to evaluate COVID-19 diagnostic testing and roll that together with clinical data and electronic health record data so that we can better understand the performance of in vitro diagnostics in the real world. There are certain limitations that currently exist with the use of traditional methods. So if we complement real-world data sets and real-world evidence with what we understand from analytical data sets, we'll be able to better develop use strategies for different types of diagnostics in different situations for the appropriate populations. There are a few different pillars of the Reagan-Udall Foundation Diagnostics Accelerator. They have to do with the test, the patient, the population, and the system. There's information provided here on the slide, and you would be more than welcome to reach out to me or someone at FDA who I'm working with for more information on how to get involved and how to see where we're going with the Evidence Accelerator at these 4 different levels. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about biomedical innovation. The biomedical innovation side is very important because new breakthroughs and scientific discoveries making their way to market is what's needed to combat this pandemic. One of the projects that we're working very closely on in combination with NIH is the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics project or initiative called RADx. This is a key component of Operation Warp Speed. We're trying to come up with collaborators across the country, innovative solutions that will build up the U.S.'s capacity for SARS-CoV testing to up to 100-fold beyond what's achievable under normal timeframes. Early and advanced stage transformative technologies are being catalyzed through RADx, and FDA is working closely with other partners in the federal government, academia, and the private sector to bring the most cutting-edge technologies to patients who need them right now, and especially leading up into the fall. One of the primary goals of RADx is driving toward at-home or at-office or at-school, really at-anywhere diagnostics that would be coupled with digital health tools and platforms to capture the information that I mentioned was so critical in our understanding of how tests perform and what how the general public is experiencing SARS-CoV-2 over time. The projects that I've just mentioned, having to do with health data, having to do with clinical data, diagnostics data, and innovation, all rely and are all improved when we have a very strong health data infrastructure. Health data and public health decision-making really go hand in hand. If we want to understand the prevalence and incidence of a disease over time and how it's impacting different groups of people geographically and by other demographic factors, we absolutely need to strengthen and have a robust public health data pipeline. The increasing granularity of data that's needed from the individual patient to the state and local level to the national or federal level is absolutely paramount as people at different stages in that continuum are making different types of decisions for the benefit of individual patients up to the benefit of the entire country and taking us all into account. I'll highlight that HHS just recently announced new laboratory data reporting guidance for COVID-19 testing. This is an important step forward with regards to harmonizing diagnostic and laboratory data and our ability to associate it with clinical and outcomes data that will help us to understand how diagnostic tests are performing in the real world and also paint a picture at every level from the local, state, and federal perspectives so that we can make solid, evidence-based public health decisions moving forward. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to engaging with stakeholders as we move forward from this point.
Thank you, Sarah. This was very well articulated. So, in May this year, MDIC's Clinical Diagnostic Program released a framework for collecting real-world evidence for IVDs. Would you please tell the audience how you see this framework being used by the agency, not only during this COVID-19 pandemic, but after as well?
That's an excellent question. I think it's very timely that MDIC released this real-world evidence framework for public comment at this time. As was mentioned in some of the projects that I highlighted previously, the gathering and understanding and really teasing apart of how to use real-world data and real-world evidence for COVID-19 is critical now. But as you allude to, I think that the systems that we come up with and hopefully the processes for example, laboratory data harmonization, the integration of data across the different pillars from diagnostic data, specimen data, patient data, clinical and demographic data, that integration of those different data streams will be important well beyond SARS-CoV-2 and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once we're able to have a better understanding of how to really utilize this type of information to improve diagnostic tools, we would be able to improve all different types of diagnostic tools for all different types of diseases and anything that would come next, anything that's come before or come next, I should say. So I think that it's really a critical moment, and it's a really prime opportunity for people to take a good close look at how we're approaching this situation when all of the eyes of the world and the country are on this particular health crisis. What can we learn from the tools that we're building right now? How can we use these tools to build them out to help lift the boat of other types of diseases for other types of people and populations moving forward? Those are the types of things that we're thinking about in the background as we're trying to advance new different types of technology solutions, data solutions, and overall research approaches for this type of situation.
Thank you, Sarah. We are getting here almost at the end of our program today. Of course, I wish if we're all right now in Washington, D.C. at the MDIC Annual Forum, networking, getting to know each other during the break. But that said, I found that this format is actually working pretty well. Granted, physical connections are irreplaceable, but the exchange of information that just occurred here in this session has been relevant, timely, and very useful. What you heard today is a small sliver of all of the exciting programs ongoing at MDIC. If your company is a member of MDIC and you are not participating currently in one of the working groups that is relevant to your area of expertise or your area of interest, let me ask you, what are you waiting for? And if your company is not a member of MDIC, let me also ask you, what are you waiting for to join? With this, I would like here to sincerely thank Jeff, Michelle, Andrew, Jessica, Cisco, Dan, and Sarah for their participation today. And last but not least, and I kept the best till the end here, Ani Saha, the Director for Partnerships for Advanced Innovation Regulatory Science at CDRH. I will ask Annie one question and then we'll let her the opportunity to closing the session. So Annie, both FDA and MDIC share a vision for an ecosystem where patients have timely and efficient access to safe and effective innovations. How would you say the partnership between FDA and MDIC has helped advance patient access?
Thank you, Nadim, for your question and for your continued support of MDIC, both as the board champion, even from the very beginning, as we're now on 8 years of MDIC, and for virtually moderating this town hall through this interesting crisis. You've really posed a great question, and I appreciate it. And really what you heard from the team and all the discussion and all the highlights you heard from everyone is really the vital role that collaborations play, both in our current pandemic environment as well as beyond, and that the efforts that MDIC has really done in collaboration with the medical device ecosystem truly cut across the entire design, assessment, manufacturing, efforts. And the one area that we haven't touched on too much that I would like to highlight in response to your question is also looking at our efforts in the collaboration we're doing with the Health Economics and Patient Values, or HEPV efforts, for us to truly meet our needs as a device ecosystem to ensure that patients have access to high quality, safe, and effective medical devices, first in the world, we truly need to collaborate, not just on device assessment and benefit risk, but also understanding and incorporating that patient perspective and evidence generation in the reimbursement field. With that, while FDA doesn't make reimbursement decisions, we do collaborate with the ecosystem to do what we can to help facilitate patient access. And that includes specifically with the MDIC HEPV efforts in leveraging our knowledge and expertise in real-world evidence and patient preferences, and provide the lessons learned, the scientific knowledge that we've gained and gleaned as we evaluate patient preference information and real-world evidence to help support frameworks to use this information for reimbursement. And so that's really how we can highlight and work together to ensure patient access. And with that, I'd like to close our session today. And first, I'd like to thank our CDRH presenters that really highlighted that continuous collaboration that we've had with MDIC, and really how those efforts complement and work with our CDRH priority efforts, and ultimately how that truly impacts the patients. You saw that through the discussions from our efforts specifically right now related to COVID-19 and beyond, and how we can really truly work from all the way from early feasibility studies, clinical trial design, incorporating that patient perspective into all of our decision making, whether it's looking at it from a manufacturing perspective or a device approval or decision. I would also like to thank everyone who's joined us virtually to hear our perspective and listen to this town hall. While we were unable to take questions from the audience during the session, we do hope you found the information from the session to be helpful, and that this session really provided you an opportunity to sort of whet your appetite, to really learn more about the MDIC work streams, and really as a way to think about and tune into the future sessions where each of the topics will be discussed in more details and be able to ask those really thought-provoking questions. And also think about how you may be able to participate in MDIC activities so that we can all work together to improve patient access to medical devices. So with that, be safe and be well as we continue to navigate towards a more healthful and just world. Thank you.
Thank you for attending MDIC's annual public forum. After taking a break next week for the July 4th holiday, please join us in 2 weeks on Thursday, July 9th, for our next session, where representatives from Roche Diagnostics, Abbott, Mayo Clinic, and FDA will come together to discuss how real-world evidence can advance diagnostics in the COVID-19 era. Visit apf.mdic.org for more information. Please make sure to join in the conversation on Twitter by following @MDIC Annual Forum and using the hashtag MDICAPF 2020.